That kind of worked out for me a few years ago. I think we'll be able to make you dinosaur radio.
We're not going to announce
I think he's running for office. John? I'm angry too.
My understanding is there's a lot of, it used to be formed, they intended form there, I don't know what they're.
How many ways to make the power supply for the enormous? Big as the rain, ran pools, transformers were so oversized. This is more time.
You can't leave home. No.
We can't freaking decide what the name is, so we'll just stick to it.
Yeah. Put that in line.
You can build a new barn out there. Dan,
I certainly built up. God bless this site.
somebody wants to open a fitness TV or
Is that still base?
Yeah. You're all set, yeah.
So these are probably all the broken ones before.
I have to admit, I gave up halfway through on that video you watched. There was just too much.
I'm not leaving work. This is not working.
That's not what you said in your text. The thing is, once you get that like working,
Back to Ham Shack Hot. When I was in Europe, Martin proposed it, and it was in the bedrooms of the house. So, there's a couple of questions. The main question we would get out here, while we are from around the world, I call us call me to get out. So, the one thing is the idea. I can even get on that in the real world, why I like it is my friends and family think I'm too busy about it. If they call me home on the inside, I kind of pick up, they know exactly what I'm doing. So it's practical for that. But for a more coaching thing, or if we want to coordinate with anybody, to have this extra tool. He wants to put in some additional, I don't know what the personality is. He's putting 9 phone lines in the so that we can hear these can run. So he's adding in this all of our buildings. Yes, yes. Yes, so that's not the handshake guideline. Yeah, Marvin. No. That's good. I will, I'll present any details, and we just put it in there. Like a fact. Yeah. That's what I mean. I'm putting the Aggies up there, I'm putting other things up there. But there's our that's what I'm doing. I got the we already have a controller, we have a radiator, supporting email. We have a rotator, an dish up here for the stuff. No, God, was and that's exactly what I did. In addition to that, I appreciate there's a lady called Virginia Norwood. She works here in the 40 and she invented. She's the mother of Lansac. She invented weather reflective radar by accident. So I thought it would be pretty cool to have
John, whose tips are these?
From what I was told, they were donated to the like a couple of 6
Well, it looks like hell right now because they did it in the garage next to the other one. It's covered in metal files, WD-40 and fingerprints, so I gotta clean it. But I will bring it soon because I paid a lot of money for it. I just had the transmission rebuilt and all that done, so better than it's ever been. I don't have any plans, but I can make plans. I know you guys used to oil now?
Yeah, Fleming didn't start until I think 2007.
I used to go to Somerville when I lived in Riggs, but it just got so hard to find parking because the place got so built up with all those houses and stuff.
We had some difficulty last time, but we were getting there. I think at late.
Yeah, okay. I watched them do all the dead work. They have a clapper wheel, basically go over every inch of the car, sandpaper on it. I don't know how he does it because it's heavy. What you have to do is spray it, but he just does it by hand. Like there's no jig or anything to keep him from that. But evidently he started out in the industry fixing dents and stuff like bridges and stuff. I assume from shipping damage or something, and then somehow he made it across. He's been doing it for almost 30 years. So, yeah. I have pictures of the dents anyway. It's funny to see it all. He circled them with a marker to show them to him. Looks like the wood is like a piece of cheese. This scratched up where it'll show me that even if he sands it, they won't go away. But while I was apart, I did a lot of painting and stuff on the other parts to get maximize the labor. I was down at my friend's house for like 10 days. It's supposed to be 4 or 3.
I was down in Maryland. Got out of there before it started raining.
My car was done Friday morning, so I could have went to Kutztown, but it was pouring like hell there. And I'm like, I'm not driving home on this. And I was so tired from the experience, I just stayed there. I saw a lot of people talking about it. Is he feeling better? There's a lot of finger scratches and teeth marks and stuff for just 40 years. They're gone now. So now I gotta worry about hurting it. Here's a picture of the workers. Well, that's for the brushing part after the dents and stuff. There's picks and hammers. I mean, he was hitting my door with a sledgehammer. Because he has to get the dents out, but then it makes it weak, so he has to make it hard again. So he actually puts big ass dents in to knock it off the hard metal, which seems crazy. Yeah, so I had to like stop walking. I knew he could do it, but it's hard walking it. But it's all done. It cost a lot of money.
How are you? I didn't do it, it was OJ. I know. I'm sure you got it. I had no idea. I had no idea. So you got a more valuable radio. I would have assumed that the same thing.
All right, everybody. We are on oral, beautiful on oral this evening. Just to let everyone know that the items over there are for auction. All those tubes and the tube carriers are for auction. So get your grubby little hands out of there.
Slouch down a little bit, so let's see if I can.
Oh, nice. All right. Everybody find a seat. Find a seat. I want to welcome everyone to the annexed room of the New Jersey Antique Radio Club here at beautiful Info Age. And it is May 16th, 2025. And this is the hotel dining room. For folks that do not know that, I think everybody probably in this room does, but I'll just go through a little bit of history. It's called the hotel dining room because this building was built as a hotel circa 1914 by Senor Marconi to house his workers and technicians working on the tower for his transatlantic wireless messages. Does everybody know that?
Yep.
Good, so I wasted 30 seconds, okay.
We gotta fill it with something.
What's that?
We made us all came out here tonight, might as well fill it with something.
True, true.
It's all right.
Okay, here we go. Any new faces in the group? Yes, yes, sir. Who are you?
Stephen.
Could you stand up, please, Stephen? What brings you here, besides that gentleman next to you?
My friend Robert probably always talked about it, so I thought I would come. And I've got an old 1920s or 30s, like a jukebox, like Bilko radio, which I thought might be able to find someone to talk to about what to do that before I plug it in and let it do my
Yeah, we don't think about plugging things in like that quickly. You know. So it's a console.
Yeah, it's a console that used to have a turntable that would flip out.
Yeah.
Right, and like some buttons and shortwave and I last had it running about 15 years ago. I used it, never haven't used it in a long time, so
Okay.
it was running with it, when we did nothing. It's in the hallway upstairs.
All right. Is that a family heirloom, so to speak?
Yeah.
All right, good, good. Well, we have a repair clinic in August. Perhaps you'd like to become a member, maybe after you see what you hear this evening. Or maybe you'll run out the door, I don't know.
I used to work at Bell Labs in Home Village.
Oh, you're one of those people.
Exactly one of those.
Oh, okay, all right. We have a lot of those people. I don't think they're here tonight. Who else is Bell Labs?
Well, Bill, that was 18 too.
No, yeah, he was 18.
Not Bill.
No.
Harry and Jules, but
Yeah, they're not here tonight. Yeah. Okay, all right. Infirmary report. Okay, here we go. It's going to be a long one. All right, a few club members have gone to visit Sal Brazindi at the Care One rehab facility in Homedale. My visits were what seemed to be on his bad days. I've been there 5 times now. And it seems other folks have been there on good days, one of them being Dave Sika. I don't know what to say. I was there today, and I walked in, and he's in room 16, and I looked into room 16. I had to use the men's room, so I looked in, I saw him. He was between the 2 beds, sitting on the floor. And I said, you know what, I better go take a leak real fast and then come back. So I did, and at that time, he was getting himself up into the bed. And I always say, Sal, it's me, it's Rich. And he looked at me, oh, hi, Rich. And, you know, it was more like, well, I saw you a couple of hours ago, Rich, you know. So he started talking about IBM. And talking about IBM, where, if you don't know, that's where he worked most of his life. And then he was looking at the squares on the floor, meaning the tiles, and they were kind of pronounced because of the grout. And he was saying, Rich, all these boxes on the floor, man, are all full of capacitors. You know, I don't know where to start. And I said, don't worry, you know, you'll figure it out, Sal. You'll figure it out. So we spent about 20 minutes together, and you know, I questioned him about a few things, and certain things he remembers, certain things he doesn't, and then he slips in and out. You know, he goes in and out, in and out. And if any of you folks have had grandparents or parents who suffered Alzheimer's, dementia over the years, and you saw it come like that, it seemed to be like that. But of course, what is he? He's 65? I think he's 65. So I really don't know his future. I honestly don't know. You know, I'll try and make it there every week if I can. I'm not saying it's depressing. It's just you know a history of somebody and you've known for so long, and they're just not what they used to be. And I guess that is depressing. So anybody want to try? Has anybody else gone besides Dave? As in, that's true, you did, right? And he had a good day or a bad day? What?
One good one and one where he slept the whole time.
Yeah.
And I talked to his wife, Lisa.
Yeah.
But there are moments, I told you, I think hopefully the group will get a laugh out of this. There are moments where he's the old Sal.
Yeah.
So he's in his wheelchair. I told you this already. He's in his wheelchair, and I said, you know, would you like to get into bed? And he sort of gave me the Groucho Marx eyebrows and goes, oh, with who? So, you know.
Yeah.
So he has, you know.
Yeah. So that's that. All right. So what else we got? Well, we've got Dave Snellman. Dave Snellman, who has talked to everybody here in the room because they've asked him all about his, I heard you were in the hospital. I heard you were this. Oh my. Meanwhile, I said, what the hell are you talking about? I saw Dave Snellman Friday afternoon, and he looked just fine. And so it turns out that Dave, go ahead and tell everybody again.
Well, the doctor, I had some routine blood work done prior to Kutztown, and I got a phone call at Kutztown. The doctor says, get your butt over to the ER because your potassium levels are through the roof. Extremely high. And so, obviously, in the pouring rain, I didn't run to the ER, but when I got there on Monday, I went through some tests, and it had gone down a little bit by then, but they took me off all my meds, and next thing you know, I've become a pincushion as they draw blood, do this, that, the other thing, and I think they just had to readjust my medication, because I was out Wednesday afternoon. I was released Wednesday afternoon, and with no additional meds, just had to follow up with blood work again and follow up with my cardiologist. I've already seen a regular doctor, so I guess I'm okay.
You look okay to me.
Stop eating bananas.
I haven't had a banana in over a year, but I've found things like potatoes, oranges, there's a whole list of things. actually, if I had to stay on all the diets I should be on, I'd be stuck with white bread and water.
On
No
the
white
bright
bread.
side, You don't have to worry about leg cramps.
All right, well, good to see you, and
Good to be here.
not a problem. All right, Bobby, how you do?
Oh, me?
Oh, you?
Yeah, I'm on my third round of meds. I'm getting better. I was able to do 2 days of cuts down and put up a video that's got an insane amount of looks, like 6,500 looks. I've done 29 videos of cuts down in my life, and this thing is just going through the roof. I don't know why, but it is. I'm doing better. I'm not 100%, but I'm getting better. I can at least get up and walk around. How I can tell is my energy level. My energy level is, as time passes, is getting better and better and better. And just to kind of, my wife reminded me of this, sometimes, Dave, when you take meds, other things can interact with the meds. And I'm taking a heart med right now where I have to watch that same problem that you have with potassium, yeah. So it's just crazy. I mean, it's meds that got me in this position to begin with. And I'll smile for everybody. It only took 6 months to get these teeth in. And the guy who did that wanted to put inserts in my jaw that didn't stick, and that's how I got the C. diff to begin with from the meds he gave me, so I had to take an antibiotic, so I wouldn't go back. So now I have a bridge there, so I don't look like a homeless guy.
Good, yeah, you can smile again.
It's getting better for Bob and Sharon, so things are all right.
Okay. All right, next we have Dave Sika. He would like to say a few words.
Well, I'll come up there to use the microphone.
Oh, this is going to be a real good one.
Well, we don't know that one, but stand near me. So the infirmary report for the newsletter is one of the things that I'm going to mention, because if you were waiting for your newsletter, you may have noticed that you didn't get it yet, and nobody noticed, huh? Okay, well. Anyway, but the reason you didn't get the newsletter is that I've been running back and forth to the hospital or the doctor's office for the last week and a half, right when we would be doing the newsletter. And you may recall, you probably didn't notice, I missed most of last year when I got knocked down with a blood infection. And that, it did a number on my spine, it did a number on my heart, and they told me that they did some imaging a couple of months ago. They said I was almost certainly going to have to go in for another open heart surgery. So I wasn't feeling too happy about that. But then they sent me in for some more imaging just recently. They said, well, you know, we got to take another look at this before we do that. And they sent me in for more MRIs and more echocardiograms and whatever. And then the cardiac surgeon said, well, you know, I want you to come in and see me right away. I'm going like, boy, that doesn't sound good. So I went in to see him the other day, and he said, it can happen, supposedly, that if you have this problem, he says it could kill you. It could go into your brain and cause a blood clot and you would die, or it could go into your lungs and, you know, a blood clot and you would die. He says, or, you know, it could just go someplace else, and, you know, it's very, very unlikely that it would go anyplace else, but it's not unheard of that it could happen that way. And he says, in my 20 years of doing this, I've never seen that happen, but that's what happened to you. So I had to put a lot of time in on that last week, didn't get to the newsletter, but I did go out and buy a lottery ticket on my way home from the doctor's office.
Thank you, I think. Anyone else would like to share? Anyone? I'm not going to pick out anyone unless you want to.
Just one comment for all you people as we grow. Old age is about fixing body parts. Just remember that.
Just think about it this way. We fix radios, you know, and your doctor fixes you.
Okay, let's get back to radio, right? All right, old business, we have a lot of old business to go through. Saturday, April 26th, Ham Club members were operating station WRTM, celebrating International Marconi Day in the rear of our Radio Technology Museum. Neville, JR, how did we do? Ta-da!
All right. I'll attempt a quickie summary here.
Well, you're good at that.
So I think we made about 400 contacts, and thanks to everybody who attended. I'll try to remember we worked Austria and a couple of South American stations, and did quite well in the DX realm.
England, Sweden.
There you go.
Poland.
All right, good, yeah. So look in the newsletter maybe next time. We might have a little couple paragraphs. We'll see how this goes.
The newsletter?
The newsletter.
Oh, the newsletter.
The newsletter.
Oh.
What newsletter?
Oh, yeah, that'd be a great idea. We'll
Yeah,
put that in. All right. Thank you, Neville. JR, you want to say anything?
He covered it.
Okay.
It was fun.
It was fun. Good. What is Gus's full name?
Louis Shirley.
Somebody said
Louis Shirley.
Louis Shirley. Okay. All right. Okay.
Don't call me Shirley.
Okay, at the same time, we had our spring repair clinic. Due to circumstances beyond our control, our clinic had fewer clients than normal because we were told that 40, then 15 students from Lafayette University were going to be clients of our repair clinic with hands-on instruction provided by us. Oh, great. Well, 15 students became 4 students. And thanks to Bill Zakowski and the radio demonstrator, the students did learn about AA5 circuitry and a short history of radio, the history itself. So Bill, you want to make some comments about that, please?
Yeah.
Come on up. Because I think you did a hell of a lot.
Anyway, yeah, what group, I forget what college they were from.
Lafayette College,
Lafayette College.
University in
Yeah, apparently the
Pennsylvania.
intent, InfoWage came up with the idea to have them attend the clinic and have a hands-on repairing a radio. So I was in a shop with Harry, he had a couple of table radios, and I'm thinking, how are you going to show these college kids who are probably smarter than the average bear, but they don't know a radio tube from a hubcap, we'll say, how to fix a radio. So coincidentally, in the shop, we had the demonstrator, All-American 5 demonstrator, and the original intent also was to have view graphs, and it was a big operation. Anyway, so what we decided on, we just used the demonstrator. So like Rich said, it came down to either 4 or 5 students showed up.
It was just 4 students and the bus driver. That made it 5.
But he was good. He was good.
He asked questions,
He was good.
yes.
So anyway, and plus, like Rich said, it was a slow clinic, so the clinic was over like 2 o'clock. And these kids showed up like 2:10. So there was nobody left in the clinic. We were in the back of the room with the AA5. And I put a couple of bugs in it. I showed them how a superhet works, demonstrated the principle, and I took a couple of connections and unsoldered them in the shop on Wednesday. Used some alligator clips so we could simulate, I disconnected the coupling capacitor and disconnected the electrolytic just to show them the effect. And they seemed to get something out of it. They enjoyed it. It's probably something they'll never see again. But being engineering students, they really enjoyed it. Other than that, you get any feedback on it?
Absolutely nothing.
Oh.
What happened to all the other
Okay.
kids?
I don't know. What happened to the kids?
Again, it started out with 40 at the beginning of the week, and then that day, that Saturday morning, it became 15.
Am I dismissed?
Um,
Am I dismissed?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, you have to go to the bathroom? You want to be dismissed? Oh, okay. So what do you, so, you know, we're anticipating a whole hell of a lot of people. And again, that's why the clinic was abbreviated for people that, I had to make phone calls to Joe, a couple other people who can't do it, who just can't do it. And, yeah, that pissed me off personally. And then, you know, the 15 became.
Is it Lafayette College out just over the border in PA?
It is, it's in Easton, it's in Easton. Yeah, if you look at their, of course I had to go and look at their,
I thought they were an art school. I didn't know that
they have an engineering department too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, nice campus too.
Anybody taking golden trees with their index finger?
No, no.
lick it for the time before.
Oh, okay. Well, I might have been, there was only 4 left, there was like actually.
So I was, for me personally, I was pissed. It just, to plan for something, I mean, I even baked 3 dozen brownies. When I usually bake just 2 dozen, I baked 3 dozen.
Marconi, they finished them all.
Yeah, good, good. All right, moving along. All right, on Thursday evening, May 1st, I had the pleasure to present the NJARC $1,000 Scholarship Award to a senior at Wall Township High School who was part of the school's STEM Pre-Engineering Academy. Her name is Sophia White. She will be attending Princeton University in the fall, majoring in electrical engineering. Now, this is the 3rd year of our club giving this award to a emeritus student going on to study in STEM. STEM, come on, quick, quick.
Science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
Oh, boy, you guys are smart, I tell you.
Sorry.
Sometimes are.
Okay.
When it becomes steam.
When they change it to STEAM or something, seriously? Right?
Yeah, art.
Art.
Arts.
Plenty of people have studied art over the time, and they can't get a job, though. That's the problem. All right, so this is a 3rd scholarship, and maybe someday, I'm not telling you when, but someday you may see a photograph of me handing this lady the check. Someday. Can't promise you when, but someday. Okay? Mr. Kelly, thanks so much this evening. So, this is the 3rd lady, too. So there's some smart ladies taking STEM programming at Wall Township. And the second one that's going to Princeton. And last year, I said to the lady, whose name was Trainer, her last name was Trainer. And I said, we'll see you at Princeton. And she looked at me like, what? And I said the same thing to this lady. And she said, oh, good. Okay, good. So anyway, happy to give them you know, it's absolutely amazing how a lot of smart kids out of that school, a lot. One sidebar, the first lady, young lady I gave a check to, all right? Her name, come on, Rich. Her name was Galtic, it was a strange name, okay? Just a name I now remember. And sure as hell, there was another scholarship award given this year to Andrew Galtic, the brother. And I was looking for the mother. I had met the mother one time. I said, boy, you have some smart kids, I'll tell you that. Man, what genetics they got. So anyway, that's what I do in May. That's what we do in May. Okay, this past weekend, Friday, May 9th and 10th, our sister club, the Delaware Valley Historic Radio Club, DVHRC, hosted their spring antique radio show at Renninger's, Hutstown, Pennsylvania. I was a vendor Friday. That was the coldest, wettest, muddiest show I have ever experienced at Kutztown. And I was dressed for it too. And I realized what was going to happen. I mean, and of course, then there's people, they come in parkers, and then we have other people in t-shirts and shorts too. And it didn't seem to matter. But The setup time, you know, the whole thing, I'm not going to go through everything that changed, no more Thursday and all that, we know that by now. But the time for setup for vendors was 8 o'clock in the morning, which is very late for us kind of guys. Me personally, it's 2.5 hours to get there. I'm going to be driving there early in the darkness anyway, just to get there. I can't be going through every traffic jam that people are going to work at 9 o'clock. So I was there a little before 7. And then we wait in our cars till 8 o'clock. And then the buyers, they open the doors to them at 10 a.m. Well, to me, that doesn't work very well. I talked to Jared Brown, the president of the Delaware Club, and he said he'd see what he can do to talk to them about that.
I like how they set up the 8 conga lines lining up for that little skinny entryway to get your cars in there.
Yeah, and if you didn't, let's say, pre-register.
I saw one guy try to cut around like a couple other cars, and one of the Rangers staff, dressed in bright orange, ran in front of that car and I thought he was going to get run over.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Okay, now I got a bunch of people that can speak up. Darren, you go ahead. So, come on up.
I'm not dressed for that.
Well, you were dressed like that on Friday.
Well,
Dressed like that every day.
Oh!
so,
JR dressed like that with a pussycat on his...
it looks like a super pussycat. So, yeah, I would agree. It was the coldest, rainiest,
muddiest.
Muddy.
Don't leave
Well,
that
mud.
out. Don't
It
leave
gets
that
muddy
out.
when it rains, but it's definitely the coldest, rainiest Kutztown I remember. But it didn't seem to change the turnout a bit. All the vendors came out, and all the buyers came out, and it was as good as Kutztown generally is.
That's the sickness of all of us.
And I got a statistic today, by the way.
Tell me.
Even with the new format and timing that nobody liked, only one vendor didn't come this time that had come last time. And that's directly
That dropped out.
That's directly from Renninger's, yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, come here. While you're here, you may as well talk about JD Auction Services that in the weight room, because that's
Okay.
something else, right?
Okay, yep. All right, so we had the auction, as usual, on Friday night, the Friday night Kutztown auction. And we had tremendous turnout. The weight room was packed like a sardine can. And we had, among other things, a very nice collection of hi-fi gear, as well as late consignments from vendors at the event, as usual. And a lot of the economy was stimulated that night. Money changed hands, and people went home with some very, very nice pieces. The turnout was spectacular. And in case you missed it, the other half of that collection will be auctioned here, but down the road a piece in Jackson on Saturday, June 7th at the firehouse where we generally have the auctions. We have some very nice hi-fi gear. We have a beautiful bunch of 1930s radios that just came in that are also really, really nice stuff. And most of them were working, as I'm told. I don't know the level of restoration. So we have some really nice radios. And we're going to have some ham gear and other things. In addition, on May 30th and 31st, we're going to be running an on-site estate sale for 2 days in the, I guess it's a hamlet, part of Ocean Township, an area known as Wanamassa, just outside of Asbury Park. And we have a house full of radios.
And raccoons.
Well, the raccoons, you know, they're a thing. Including a beautiful GPR 90. I wasn't just staring at John Ricola, but, you know.
He doesn't have one of those.
Actually, he does from one of our last estates.
I was just being facetious.
Communications receivers, some modern stuff, clocks, barometers, scientific instruments, well over 100 microscopes, and test equipment.
100 microscopes?
Well over 100 microscopes. Big microscopes, little microscopes.
Electronic microscopes?
What's that?
Electronic?
Electronic microscopes, optical microscopes, binocular, trinocular, I'm trying to think of the other, what do you call arm microscopes, manufacturing microscopes, inspection microscopes. I'm trying to think of every other microscope I can think of. No electron microscope. We have children's microscopes, portable travel microscopes, geologists' microscopes. It's going to be an interesting sale, and there's probably, along with the radios, a lot of other stuff people here would like. So I will put it out on the, I almost did it.
Yeah, I was going to grab the mic before you did it too.
I'll put it out on the communicator as soon as we have it up with pictures. It will be that Friday, Saturday, the 30th and the 31st down the road, just outside of Asbury Park in Wanamassa. And then on June 7th, we will be having the auction in Jackson, which will also go out on the communicator.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
I have a question on that Jackson one. Do the sellers set reserves, or is it just basically open bidding?
99.999% of items do not have reserves.
Yeah,
And if we do have reserves, they are approved by us, meaning they are realistic reserves. We don't take.
They can't waste time.
We don't take items with 30 years ago pricing or, yeah.
All right, thank you. Dave, what do you think? Do you think the setup time may change? The buyer time may change, be bumped back?
Well, there's talk of that. I haven't heard from anything from Renninger's yet. We talked about maybe a 7:30 start for vendors and maybe a little earlier for buyers. As far as the club was going, we thought the event was just as good as all the others, except for the weather. But hell, we survived a tornado once, or a hurricane. So we had horizontal rain through the place. So that was, a little bit of mud was nothing.
Oh, okay.
Horses can do it in Kentucky, so we can do it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we were surprised how well it did work out.
Yeah.
I mean, for all the wailing and gnashing of teeth on Antique Radio Forum and stuff like that, no one was going to show up. That didn't happen.
No, that did not happen. But it was condensed. For me personally, it was condensed in the sense the buyers coming in at 10, and I'm a one-day kind of guy, and by 5 o'clock, it's over with. So that's why I would love to see it move back.
Well, we can try a little bit.
Because the staff is there anyway at that time.
Well, yeah, again, it depends on, we'll work with Renninger's to see what we can do.
Yeah.
And we'll take it from there.
Okay.
So, but we know that Thursday is.
Yes, that's gone. That's history.
Yeah. But I think that that's just going to be the way it's going to be.
Okay. All right, thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Rich?
Yes.
A couple other things, I guess everybody watched my video. There's two other videos that are up there, Handfest PA.
Yes.
And he kind of like glances over things real quick. I have mixed feelings about that. But this morning, John Hagman, who's been doing a lot of still pictures and he's doing some video, he has a YouTube channel. He put up a video this morning and it's really nice.
And is it a still video, a montage?
It's like a slideshow.
That's what I mean, yeah.
He sets it to, mixed music that you
Yeah, no, he always does a fantastic job. He's got an amazing camera too, yeah.
He does it every touchdown, so check him out, it's really good.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where we get our calendars.
What's that?
That's where the calendar.
Yes, yeah, every year he makes up the canal, yeah. So I was a vendor, I'm bitching and moaning, but I did make money too, all right? So we'll see what happens, all right? All right, any other old business before new business? All right, reaching into, no, where am I going here? All right. Yeah, all right, reaching into June, our amateur radio operators will be precipitating? Precipitating.
Wait, precipitating, that happens in the spring and the fall.
But yeah, precipitating up in Parsippany. That's great, yeah. In the ARRL Field Day, that's Saturday, June, and that's 27th through that's Sunday, the 28th. Yeah. With its antenna set up on Friday, the 27th. All club members, hams, and guests are welcome to attend. We will have more info at our June 13th meeting at Princeton. So keep in mind that we, Al, what do you think? How many years has it been now?
Pardon me?
How many years do you think we've been participating in Field Day?
5 or 6, I guess.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Right? Okay. All right, good.
We've had some exciting weather too.
Yes.
What's the date? Excuse me, what's the date of it?
Say it again?
The date of it?
Yeah, the 27th through Sunday the 28th, okay? You know, it's 24 hours over. And then the guys get together on the 27th for a setup for the antennas. Okay. All right. Okay. It has come to my attention that some members, okay, here we go, were offended by the AI image of President Trump dressed as a pope, which was all over the internet. So, I need to remind everyone that religion and politics can be toxic to any organization, and it has no place on the NJARC communicator. All right. Trustee Bill Zukowski, where are you, Bill? Raise your hand. No. Okay. And Jerry and Gordo started our Google groups, all right? And they are both moderators to the Google groups, to our communicator. And they, over the, how long we had being on Google groups? 4 years? 4 or 5? Yeah, okay. And fortunately, have not had to criticize anyone for any real inappropriate postings. But this time it came close, okay? So, just be aware, one funny cartoon may not be funny to all right? So, I have to get that out. There will be some verbiage from other clubs having to do with things of that sort, and that'll be on our website soon. All right. Okay. How many members paid a visit to 8 Donner Street in Homedale yesterday or this morning? Wow.
I looked at the pictures.
Well, you guys are pretty smart then. Because you didn't waste any time, all right? All right, turns out that when I went to visit Sal today, it's at Care 1 in Homedale, and it was all of a mile and a half to 8 Donner Street. So I said, well, let me take a little diversion after I see him. And I went there. And unbelievable prices of stuff. Unbelievable. I walked in there, and it's a big rolling ranch house, a lot of space, garage, basement. And I noticed that I was maybe one of 5 people in there. That kind of tells you something, right? And there was a fellow in the basement where the men are with the stuff, and he was pricing things when people would go up to him, and I could see them go like this and then walk away. And he had some interesting things. There was a couple loose couplers, Navy couplers, and he said, well, yesterday that was $400. Today it's $200. Oh, okay. And all right, I'm going to get to you. I'm going to get to you. All right. And so I'm looking around, I'm thinking, I've seen really crazy prices on our kind of stuff, right? And I see a box of 813 tubes, transmitting tubes. You can sell them, a lot of the audiophiles use them nowadays. So, all right, maybe I didn't look that closely to the box and the price it said on it, but I thought it said 25 cents a tube. So I took some of the tubes, I took maybe 5 or 6 tubes, and I went to the guy and I went to pay him, and he looked at me and says, no, that's $25 a tube. And I looked at him, I said, really? Yeah, really. I said, okay, I'll put them back. And it went downhill from that point. I think what Al is using as a splitter there, that's the only thing I bought there this morning. And even that was $3. You think you get it for $1, But you never know. All right, now come on up and you give the rest of the story, because you know these people.
Well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Was this in the communique where it's...
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, James Valdetta from Manhattan happened to find it in New Jersey.
So, I don't know who the gentleman was that lived there. He was, obviously, you could tell he was former Bell Labs by the stuff in the house.
And he had passed away.
Yes. I don't know if he passed away or he's no longer living there. But
well, that's what the guy...
Okay, that's very fine. The gentleman you were referring to, his name is Jerry, by the way.
Okay.
Like a lot of these companies, they don't know the product, they don't know that stuff. So they try, they do the same thing everybody does, and I do it too. They take out their phones and they look up stuff they don't know. But they can't look up everything. So he overprices stuff that he looks up, and then he sells stuff below value that he doesn't know. And then some of the prices I just don't understand, because I bought a Diacro finger brake, 12-inch finger brake that was in perfect condition for $75. Because I have the rest of the set of that was really what brought me to the sale. It's kind of radio related because it's for chassis work, but it's, that was more than reasonable. So some of their prices are all over the place. Some of the prices were more than reasonable, some of them were ridiculous. So that's why you hire us to do this estate sale. That's why you hire JD Auction Services, because we price the stuff to sell, but also to get the most money for the estate, but so that like it actually moves.
All right. Truth be told, reality, it's over tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
The prices are still that way.
That's right.
They're not going to move. There's so much stuff in that building. What do they do with it?
I don't know,
should we say,
because I know
or
what
should
we
I
do
say
with it,
just come and go to the dumpsters and do some diving?
I don't know what that company does, because I've seen him do that before. So I don't know. Some companies do cleanouts afterwards.
Darren, there was a ton of stuff.
I know what was there. I was there. It's a...
This isn't the same outfit that did the Bentley Road sale.
No. Like I said, if you know anybody who needs this kind of service, hire us. I'm not saying that for myself. I'm saying that because, yeah, right, exactly. I don't have to say anymore, but yeah.
Okay. All right, so, James Valdata, if you're out there, JR, thank you. JV, I'm sorry. If you're out there, thank you for being so observant of New Jersey estate sales. But, wow, it was a bust. Okay, this past Wednesday, I met with our club accountant in Red Bank to file our 2024 tax forms with the IRS, since we are a designated 501c3 charity. We do that every year, right around May 15th. And there's not every accountant company will do this, so that's why we use these folks. All right, any other new business? Oh, I do have one more thing, and I will read it to you. I just got it about an hour ago while I was here wandering around, and it is from our club member Bruce Mager. Does everybody know club member Bruce Mager? From, all right, from Waves, okay? Okay, he sends me an email. Rich, hi Rich. Chinese buyers are back. Wondering if the club has any more cheap consoles they want to move. Let me know. Thanks, Bruce. Now, everybody's going, ooh, yeah, I'll bet I have a few. All right, the backstory of this is there is a contingent of Chinese investors who fill a container periodically and with consoles and take them back to Asia. What they do with them, don't know. Ray Chase has been a recipient of these consoles, and he's empty. How many have you moved, let's say, from storage?
We gave Bruce about, I think at least 15 consoles.
And that was about a year ago?
Huh?
About a year ago?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
Yeah. So.
And, but I have to talk to him, see who wants a different type, because previously he wanted the 1930s ones that were all the way down.
No stretcher legs.
And he did not want any high boys,
Yeah.
legs on them. And that's one thing we still got a lot of.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. So let me know. Anybody's got, let me know, and get in touch with Bruce. All right. So, okay. All right. Any other new business before I go to Ham Shack Corner? Okay. All right, Ham Shack Corner. Ham Fests are bursting out all over this time of year. So you've got Dayton Hamvention in Xenia, Ohio, is happening this weekend through the 16th, 16th through the 18th. And I know a few of you folks have been out there. Have you all been out there to Xenia, or have you been to Xenia? No, I'm talking to somebody from Ohio.
Not for the Ham Fest, I don't think.
Okay, all right.
I was there when it was still at the Harrah Arena.
Okay. Anybody else has been there? No, David?
We went at the same time.
Same time? Okay.
It's weird, you get the same glory days stories about, it's not as good as it used to be, but it's huge.
Yeah, well, we hear that all the time, all over, yeah.
I remember, I talked to some guy, and he's like, I was here once and there was a V2, and I'm trying to figure out what it could be and radio stuff. And he meant the rocket. There was one year there was a V2.
Really? Was it active?
I don't know. It wasn't.
Was,
Yeah. Well, like obviously it wasn't as good as it used to be, so I didn't get to see it.
Well, he showed you the problem.
but no launcher, right? No. Okay. No, okay. All right, locally this Sunday, the ARA Tailgate Hamfest in Landing, New Jersey, which is, who is that? That's Split Rock? Yeah, Split Rock. I don't know why I didn't write that down. Yes, Split Rock. Okay. And next Saturday, May 24th, the Barra Hamfest at Westwood High School parking lot. And May 31st, the Omark Spring Hamfest in Spring Lake, and I think that's in the firehouse parking lot, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And moving to June, and not that you guys are going to spend any money on tolls, but Sunday, June 8th, Limemark has their outdoor hamfest in Bethpage, New York, Long Island. Saturday, June 14th, Fairlawn, ARC Hamfest in Fairlawn, New Jersey, and I'm sure Judith and And Fred will be talking a storm about that soon, too.
Or maybe just Fred.
Why?
Why not?
No, Judith is in charge.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool, this ought to be good.
Oh, she's at the gate like she is with the PAL.
Okay.
Oh, no, she's it. She's it. Oh, yeah. All right, any other Hamfest? Did I miss something? Anybody go to a Hamfest that I didn't talk about? No? All right. All right, look, after a very brief break, sale of our 50/50 tickets, and I'm sure we've got volunteers who are going to sell the tickets, right? We will be having our technical coordinator, Al Clays. He will give us his presentation on Edward Armstrong and the historic commemorative plaque our club gifted to the city of Yonkers I think that's 12 years ago, okay? So brief, very brief, guys, brief. All right. Who's going to volunteer for sale of the 50/50s? Yes, Steve.
I have, my grandfather had this, one of these Norelco consoles to the floor.
Yeah.
And it looked like that with it open.
Yeah.
Any idea like where you would look for one other than just I've looked on the internet, I knew the sort of model number of the kind that it was. But where would you look for something like that?
Look for something? What do you mean?
So I wanted to buy one, something like that.
Oh, I thought you had this.
No, my grandfather had one.
Oh.
I always thought it was elegant because it wasn't very big.
Yeah, right.
And
oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thanks.
But that, you were talking about consoles before, so I was wondering.
Yeah, but that's very exotic. I've never seen one of those.
Yeah, it was lovely, right? I have the radio from it. My uncle put a Marantz receiver in it, and then sold it to someone that's gone. I can't find where it went to. I tried to trace down to find the cabinet. It was really elegant because it had the white, the really nice honey color on the inside with it down, and it also closed up. It's.
I mean, what you try and do, just put a like or a save on eBay that they will send you. They'll put it out there that they will send you.
On eBay, right?
Yeah,
yeah. And is there any of the other websites that would be good to sort of look for that kind of stuff?
It's got to be probably some sort of a foreign radio website.
Yeah.
Not that I know of, though. And you said Norelco.
Norelco, right?
Yeah. I'd look. Yeah. See, Norelco. There are hardly any Norelco radios. With the shavers. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
We all had them when we were younger. That's a beauty. I've never ever seen anything like that.
Right, and I've not seen another one like it. That was, I've seen articles that were for sale 10 years ago or 9 years ago online, but it would be nice. I have a spot in my house. We have a big 7-bedroom house, the loudest square footage in Middletown, so we have room for that in my den.
Lucky you.
Yeah. What would it cost? What does it cost to join the group?
It's very expensive.
Yes.
$25.
Okay.
Would you like to join?
I'll give you.
Yeah, please. Yeah. I've got it in my briefcase.
I can't see it.
Yeah, Steve.
Cool. I'll give you the cash part. I'll just leave it up there for you.
Sure. Thank you.
So my wife just got home from the hospital today. She had a back operation.
A what?
So my wife
back.
So she had a back. So luckily I could come here tonight because my son drove her from Morristown back and he stayed with her. So I could.
She didn't fall or anything, right?
No, it's age. It's age. So she had that, you know, it's
Just age. It's like, yeah. It's like, you know, it's like we get up in the morning, going to bed, we go, right, yeah, like, we go to bed with, oh shit, that hurt or something. And then you get up in the morning and you say, well, that doesn't hurt anymore, but something else
must be
hurts.
dead. That's the joke, you know, the husband gets up.
Thank you, Steve.
The husband gets up in the morning and he says, sweetheart, I'm dead. She says, what are you talking about? I'm talking. She says, I'm dead. How can I talk? She says, I'm dead. Nothing hurts.
That's one way, yeah.
Yeah, so see, that's what's there. So everything else is good. I got to ask you a question. You said your accountant's in Red Bank?
Yeah.
And you come down just for that meeting?
I have friends down here, and he's my accountant too. Because, so what it was is, it's a long about story, but very few accountants do 501c3 charities. It's only a limited amount. And the fellow that I did there, originally, Irish guy, Steve, was a great guy, really good guy. It was reasonable, all that. And then I said, this is so good, I'm going to go move my own personal stuff to him. And it was great for 3 years, and he goes up and dies, unbeknownst to anybody. And he was like 65, his dad. So the business went to Alfonso Soriano, who moved it. He's a nice guy. It's a big corporation, a big corporate place on 35. He's okay. He's all right, but he's funny.
That's a trip for you.
Everything's a trip for me. Everything.
That's why you're good. You do it.
So I'm doing it if I can keep doing it. That's all. You know.
Good for you. Yeah. Everything else good?
Well, I did what had to be done, and yesterday I was in White Plains, New York, and I finally got a what do you call it? Irrevocable trust I set up for my daughter. I hope you have something like that too. Huh?
I don't have trusts.
No?
No, I have the three other things, the will, the power of attorney, you know, in case anything happens, they can pull the plug. So I got those two. Irrevocable trusts. Fernie talks about it, but I leave it up to her, so whatever you want to do. She hasn't set up. So I don't know. I don't know.
How many properties do you own?
Just the one. It's my house.
So you don't. See, I own a couple of properties.
No, I just have the house. I have the house and what I have in the bank, and that's it. And it's a third. Of course, the toys. You know, like I have a Rolex going to this kid. But basically,
but you've given the stuff out already, which is a smart thing to do. Yeah. And they don't know that the look-back period is 5 years, so I had to do something.
The thing is that some of the stuff, if you give, the kid's got to pay taxes on it, and I didn't want that. So, I don't know. Whatever.
Costs a lot of money.
Anything you give your kids, it's not taxable to them. So split it 3 ways, have fun. I hope it's later rather than soon.
It looks like a parking.
We'll do this again.
Always in the way.
Excuse me?
That's a Wells card. That off.
I'm sorry. Can we do this again?
What did I do wrong?
I can't read a damn thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. My handwriting's worse than the doctor, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why I got into computers.
Yeah, slow it down.
Oh, okay.
Turning it on. Okay, okay, here, look, listen up. $21 tonight, $21, $21. Okay, all right. So, we need somebody to pick, Who's gonna pick?
New guy.
New guy? New guy? New guy, get up here.
He's like behind his phone, he's right here.
No, Steve, we actually, come here. Yeah, we don't, I don't want anybody to hear this, but we arrange it with the new guy to win the raffle. It makes him feel better.
Oh, there you go. Okay, good. Right, so it's hard to pick my own card like that. Okay.
All right, Steve. Steven is.
The blue ticket.
The blue ticket.
All right. 4, 1, 3, 1, 2, 7, 4. 7, 4.
Uh-oh.
7, 4.
1, 2, 7, 4, right? Yeah, that was pretty good. That was neat that you made that work that way. Let's see.
Well, like I said, Stephen, this is how we arrange it.
That was good, right? That was good.
No, people think the first one. We always do that, Stephen.
Well, good.
So
Well, thank
here's
you very much.
$21. Matter of fact,
I gave you 25.
Listen, Stephen is a member of our club. How about a round of applause?
That is funny.
He paid us.
Paid you 25 and I got 21 back.
He paid us $25 and he gets $21 back.
There we go.
Now, how do you beat that?
That's pretty cool.
So I tell you, Steve, yeah.
Such a deal.
Yeah, you're happy you came back today. Huh?
Did nobody shuffle those tickets?
Look, don't you remember, Scott, when you joined the club, that you won the raffle the first time too?
You gotta shuffle it, buddy.
I love this. I love this. Okay. All right. Enough. Our technical coordinator, Al Clays, will give his presentation now. All right, so please. Al's worked on this. He worked on this and gave it at the Columbia University also many years ago. And of course, this was at the Historical Society of Yonkers, okay? And he will tie it in to the plaque also. Yeah.
Stick that on here somewhere.
Yeah, not the beard, because then they hear. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm going to climb up on this stool because I'm in a situation where I can talk longer than I can stand these days. Anyway, like Rich mentioned, well, and some of you have heard the Armstrong presentation like maybe 10 years ago here, but about a month ago, I was asked to do a presentation for the Historical Society up in Yonkers, which was Howard's childhood home. And my working title there was Armstrong for Civilians. This is going to be a little more technical, but there will be some of the Yonkers stuff in here, including this picture, which was kind of good for me. From 1921, they had a billboard up there. He was already a favorite son of Yonkers. And, well, the picture was taken by his brother-in-law, but apparently this billboard with this inscription actually was there. But come forward a few years, NJARC back in 2013, this is one of those time flies when you're having fun situations. We helped finance this Armstrong plaque. Let me get right place here. No, wrong way. Which way? Back? No. Back. There we go. We helped finance this Armstrong plaque, which is down the hill from from his boyhood home, which doesn't exist anymore. It's right along the Hudson River up in Yonkers. Richard was there for the dedication. He knows more about it. I was at the radio station at Armstrong Tower running the soundboard while they were doing a remote pickup, but that's another story. So anyway, let me reposition this projector a little bit. So Edwin Howard Armstrong, he was actually born in New York City, but when he was in grade school, his family moved to this big fancy house up in Yonkers. His father was a vice president of the U.S. branch of, which British publishing company. But anyway, he was in business. There was some money in the family and whatnot. And at one point, about the time he was coming out of grade school, going into high school, his father brings him a copy of the boy's second book of inventions, where he reads about Marconi and some other people. For a while, he thought maybe he wanted to play around with X-rays, having read about the Curies and Röntgen. But by the time he was a freshman in high school, he decided that radio was for him and he was going to do things. So one of the big influences on him was Charles R. Underhill. Now, this guy had worked with Walter Massey, who was a wireless pioneer, had a radio station out on Point Judith in Rhode Island, like around 1900. And Underhill worked with him, and he and Massey published a book on radio, wireless telegraphy and telephony. And Underhill subsequently moved to Hastings-on-Hudson, which is just the next village up from Yonkers. And Howard's uncle meets Underhill on a train one day, says, oh, I have a nephew who's interested in radio. One thing leads to another, and Howard would bicycle about a mile up to Underwood's house after school on a lot of days and learned a lot from him. Now, I can really relate to this. I had an RCA engineer that helped me do things when I was about that age too, so that was one of the big influences on Armstrong. So he becomes interested in radio. Of course, these days it's crystal sets and whatnot. He builds a 120-foot mast in the backyard. And that's he up the mast. And then he enrolls in Columbia, in engineering school at Columbia. It's reputed that he commuted on a red Indian motorcycle. This is a fake picture that Steve Close did when we did the plaque. But anyhow, so he's a student at Columbia, but he's playing with radio all the while. And his shop was in the cupola up here in the attic of the house. And this picture was Armstrong returned there back at some point in the 20s. And the place was pretty decrepit at that point, but there was a lot of his stuff still there. So anyway, need to think about the state of the art in 1912, which is the year he invented the regenerative circuit. There were no practical amplifiers. Radio was Morse code only. There were some, and it was mostly spark, although there were starting to be some continuous wave radio systems on the air. We'll talk about that a little bit here in a second. In other areas where maybe electronics would help out, telephony was all just carbon microphones, and if you wanted to make a long-distance phone call, sometimes you had to go to a soundproof booth at the telephone company to have that work out. And of course, computing in those days was all mechanical. I threw this in just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here in the way of frequencies. There was this thing called the Radio Act of 1912, and this was the original frequency allocations. The government, read that as Navy, grabbed what we would call long wave today from 500 kilohertz on down a bit. Where the broadcast band is now was assigned for commercial applications, you know, ship to shore and things like that, but the non-Navy. And the only way they knew to do long distance communications was to go down almost to audio. And so the stuff above 1600 meters, that is below about 180 kilohertz, was what they used for transoceanic communications. And amateur radio got assigned to everything from 1500 kilohertz up because they couldn't figure out how to do anything with it. So leave the amateurs play around there. We talked about spark transmitters just a little bit. We review that. You have a high voltage transformer. You have some high voltage capacitors. They're connected to an inductor. And so on each half cycle of the AC, capacitor charges up until you have enough voltage to arc across the spark gap. And at that point, the energy in the capacitors becomes a magnetic field in the inductor until that drains down. And so you have this, there's a mechanical analog of this. Every spark, you get a decreasing waveform like so. Crude, but was the only game in town when Marconi got started. The receivers, by 1906 or so, we get to crystal sets. Before that, you had magnetic detectors, and before that, you had coherers and things like that. But we come around to crystal detectors, and of course, you have these signals, you rectify them, and then these positive pulses get smoothed out in the headset, and you hear the tone of the spark. These are called damped waves because you have this ping that damps out. And the problem with this is if you look at this in the time domain, it looks like this. Look at it in the frequency domain. This was a 500 kilohertz signal. Well, it's wider than hell because what you have is you have a spectral line at every spark frequency interval, way out in both directions. So this is real inefficient, and it makes it real difficult to have multiple stations operating in the same geographic area. So the alternative to that is the continuous wave, and one of the early proponents of this was Reginald Fessenden. We'll hear some more about him here in a bit. But now you have a waveform that's just a sine wave, and spectrally that's one discrete frequency. Yeah, maybe there's some harmonics, but nothing serious. So this means that your receiver just has to deal with the signal in a very narrow bandwidth. You don't have to listen to a bunch of noise trying to pick up that big broad signal. And the way they did this, there were two things. One's called the pulse and arc. This is a DC arc that's contained in a magnetic field in here. And a DC arc has a negative resistance portion of its curve. And what that means is if you connect that to a tuned circuit, the tuned circuit will oscillate and generate a continuous wave signal. Of course, the receivers were real inefficient, so you end up with this is one they built for the Navy. They were running a megawatt into this thing to get a reasonable signal out of it. The other alternative was rotating machinery like the Alexanderson alternator, which is a really clever device. You have an electric motor at one end, and the armature of the alternator is a solid steel disc that has holes in it, and they fill the holes with copper so that it doesn't make siren noises when it turns. Because if you tried to have an armature that had windings on it, and then you try to spin it 20,000 RPM, it's going to come apart real easy. So this was the other way, and the better way of getting continuous waves. Now, the problem with continuous wave is that here's the signal you want to hear, and you run it into a crystal detector, and all you get is DC out of it. So on a telegraph signal, if it was real strong, you might hear key clicks, but that's it. The solution, which was a development of Fessenden, was heterodyne reception. You have the signal you want, you inject a signal that's close to it in frequency, like say if this was 1 megahertz and this was 999 kilohertz, that goes into your detector, which is a nonlinear circuit. That generates signals at the sum and difference of these two. The sum you don't care about, that's going to be way up here in RF, but the difference comes out to be audio. So now you can hear the continuous wave signal. Mentioned Fessenden, and here was Fessenden's receiver. This was even before crystal detectors. Fessenden was using an electrolytic detector, a microscopically thin piece of silver wire stuck in a container of acid, and he managed to bias that with a thing just enough that it would detect. So again, it's a rectifier that would just get you DC from the continuous wave coming in. But then he ran a pulse and arc down here. Now, he was running Alexanderson alternators for transmitters, rotating machinery, but trying to pull one of those to the exact frequency you wanted to get an audible beat note was going to be a lot of trouble. So what he did was he ran a pulse and arc. Here's 500 volts DC coming in through some chokes. Here's the arc, and then this tuned circuit over here can be tuned so you get your heterodyne beat, you can receive the signal. The problem with this scheme is there's still no gain here. All the signal that gets to your ear came from the transmitter. So you're really crippled. You start thinking about megawatt, 200 kilowatt transmitters just to maybe span the ocean. So this is the environment in which Armstrong is learning about radio and looking for better things to do. I'm not going to talk about amplitude modulation, that just happened to be in there. But let's talk about vacuum tubes a little bit. The original radio tube was the Fleming valve. John Ambrose Fleming, working for Marconi, made use of this. It's a diode, so you can use it for a detector. This was based on the Edison effect. Edison had observed that when he was trying to figure out why the sides of his light bulbs turned black, he discovered that if he put another element in the evacuated tube and put a positive voltage on that he could get current to flow through the vacuum. The electron had not been identified at that point, so it was sort of mysterious, but it was thermionic emission. Marconi used these for detectors in in their radios to replace the magnetic detector. That's what they were using on the Titanic, but at the same time they were transitioning to Fleming valves. But it turned out that once the crystal detectors were developed, they actually made retrofit things to plug into their Fleming valve receivers to put crystal detectors in them because they work better. So this is where our friend Lee DeForest comes in. Of course, he was a radio experimenter, always looking for some way to make a dollar, and got involved in a lot of strange business deals. And you gotta worry about a lot of stuff when you're dealing with DeForest. But he comes up with the idea of, let's take the Fleming valve, here's a filament and a plate, they called it a wing, and he invents the grid in between. And so of course, you probably all know this, but what that does is then you have an A battery lighting up the filament. You have a signal coming into the grid. You have a load, you have a plate circuit, high voltage battery, so there's an inherent current flowing around here. And so a small voltage change here can make a fairly large current change here, so little signals become big signals. We draw it schematically like this. In reality, they're usually concentric, like so. So that was the basic Audion, and they just used them for detectors. You'd run your signal in here and put your headphones out here. It would be what today we call a grid leak detector, but the Audions were so leaky that you didn't need the grid leak resistor. You just ran a capacitor in there, and there you were. So Armstrong procures an Audion. Underhill may have actually been responsible for that. I'm not sure about that, but it was about the same time. And so we'll talk about the circuit details on the next slide, but anyhow, he took some notes when he did this. This was the fall of 1912. He's in his senior year at Columbia, and probably should be working on the schoolwork, but he's building a radio. I can understand that. But anyhow, increases sensitivity maybe 100-fold, greatly improves selectivity. Because it will oscillate, it can be its own heterodyne oscillator to receive continuous waves, the so-called autodyne mode, self-heterodyning. And of course, because it can oscillate, you could use it for a transmitter and not have to fool around with pulse and arcs and rotating machinery and things like that. So he solves a whole bunch of problems all at once. And this, of course, becomes the enabling technology to make CW telegraphy practical and make radio telephony even possible. People like DeForest had fooled around did radio telephone experiments about 1910. He had a small pulse and arc, and he put a carbon microphone in series with the antenna. They could hear him a block away, but anyway, I think he actually broadcast an opera that way. But that was the state of the art. That's where Armstrong comes in here. So a few words about Armstrong's circuit, and there's no pictures of what his original radio looked like. The picture that does exist is this equipment that was sent to the Smithsonian later on. It was equipment that had been at Columbia. And sure enough, if you trace out this stuff now, the big deal here was to hear the distant stations. So they were going to want to tune way down, like to 30 kilohertz or so. So the coils were in these big tall boxes here, a lot of inductance. So he builds a radio kind of like the way DeForest would have suggested. You have a tune circuit on the input and the tube and a battery and headset. And it's interesting to read Armstrong's explanation of how he made the discovery. He says this bypass capacitor on the headset. You've all seen that in crystal sets and one-tube radios and whatnot. And Armstrong says, I always tried that in crystal radios and it didn't make any difference. And he builds DeForest circuit. And DeForest swore that while there was RF over in this circuit, that there was no RF in the plate circuit. So Howard is just messing around. He puts the bypass capacitor in there, and the signal gets just a little bit stronger. And he knows the capacitor isn't big enough to affect the audio. So he says, aha, there must be radio frequencies over here. And if there is, well, I'm going to put another tune circuit in there and tune it up. And maybe we'll be able to. What's happening here is, now, one of my pet peeves, and you've all read the books, they describe the regenerative circuit, and they say the signal gets amplified over and over again until it gets loud. Here's what happens. It's a matter of negative resistance. You've got this tune circuit, and of course there's always some loss in here, no matter what you do. And so that tune circuit maybe will get you gain and selectivity that looks something like this. Well, now you take some of the signal that you've amplified, you feed it back into this circuit, and it cancels out the losses in the resistor. So it's negative resistance. You're subtracting resistance here. That makes the Q of the circuit improve, and the signal strength and the selectivity go way up. When you finally cancel out all the resistance and feed more signal back in there, then this thing oscillates and becomes an oscillator transmitter. So that's the basic thing here. Now, I don't have, well, the speaker's back there, you should be able to hear that. You may recognize this guy.
Here at the Radio Technology Museum in Wall Township, New Jersey, a replica of Armstrong's original regenerative receiver is used to demonstrate the evolution of his discovery.
Light up our vacuum part audio tube here. And we'll tune the input of this so we can hear more of it. Now, that's about as good as Lee DeForest radio worked. And it wasn't that much better than the crystal set. The world didn't need a path to his door on this. Part of the problem was that DeForest didn't understand how it worked. He maintained that while there were radio frequency signals at the input of this circuit, there weren't any at the output of the circuit. Armstrong got some clues that that wasn't the case. And so he says, if there's radio frequencies on the output, let's put another tune circuit over there and tune it up. And when you do that, that gets a whole lot louder. So he's now got the best radio receiver in the world. But it gets better. If you tune further, that sound that everybody's going to remember changes. Like that. Howard says, what's going on here? It took him 6 weeks figuring out that the circuit, when that sound happens, that the circuit is oscillating. It's generating a radio frequency signal of its own.
What this means is that through regeneration, the audion can not only receive and dramatically amplify a signal, but it can also transmit one as well. The door of possibilities flies open. It's easier and cheaper than ever before to transmit and receive not just the sparks of Morse code, but also continuous radio signals, like music and speech, over greater distances. Armstrong's regeneration circuit is revolutionary, but it represents only one of the many contributions he will make to the advancement of radio technology.
So like I said, the original discovery was made in the fall of 1912. He does some work on it. He knows he ought to have a patent. In fact, let me back up here a little. There it is. He goes to his father and says, "Hey, Dad, I need money for a patent." John says, "Nothing doing. Make sure you finish college, and then we'll talk about the patent money." Well, somebody he knew says, "Draw up your circuit and take it and get it notarized," which he did, and that established precedence in the long patent fights that went on for a long time afterward, because people were, of course, jealous of this discovery. And so, spring of 1913, he graduates, gets the money, they get working on a patent, get a patent in place. The fall of 1913 or so, and meanwhile, he's set up radio like this at Columbia. Now, the Columbia thing was really important, because he's in the electrical engineering curriculum. The main guy running that was Michael Pupin, who's one of the few people in the world that understood tuned circuits. He had a patent on loading coils for telephone lines. And so there was a lot of high power things to help Armstrong figure out what was going on with his discovery. And in fact, the story goes, fall of 2013, Pupin is out to lunch with some people, I think from AT&T, and he's bragging to them about how good Armstrong's radio is. And then he comes back and he sees these guys about a week later, and he said, "Hey, you really had us going. We were believing this." He said, no, come on up and demo it. So they started doing demonstrations at Columbia of Armstrong's radio. And in fact, Lita Forrest came, and while they had the radio hidden in a box, they made Lita Forrest listen to it from another room, knowing that he would be interested in this in a big way. And one of the groups that came up to hear the demonstration were the people from Marconi. And they said, "Well, gee, this is really interesting, but we have to hear this somewhere where we can compare it to our equipment and know what's going on." So, last day of January 1914, this place was under construction. 150 yards down over the hill is the operations building down by the Shark River. That was under construction but not completed. But there was a construction shack outside of this. The mile-long antenna was in place that fed down to this area. And so Armstrong rides the train down with his radio down to Belmar, and they pick him up. Professor Moorcroft was with them. I think that was adult supervision. And they come down to demonstrate the radio. Roy Wiegand, who was the chief engineer for for Marconi was here, and he brings his ace radio operator, organization climber, David Sarnoff, who had started out sweeping floors at Marconi, became a radio operator, and by this time, 1914, he's chief inspector of construction for the transoceanic radio sites that Marconi's building. But he's only 22 years old. So Dave and Howard spend the night in the construction shack playing with the radios. And the Marconi radio is a Marconi 101 crystal set. This is Mike Molnar's, as a matter of fact. Wish we had one for the museum, but they're scarce as hen teeth and worth a lot of money. Again, we don't know what Armstrong's radio looked like. But they stayed up all night. First thing they did was tune up Marconi Station in Clifton, Ireland on the crystal set. Yeah, they could hear it, but just barely. Armstrong tunes it up on the regen, lays the headset down on the table, and walks back 4, 5, 6 feet. They could still copy perfectly. And then the really impressive stuff, like I said earlier, there were continuous wave systems on the air, and they managed to tune in the German station in Nauen and the Pulse and Arc stations in San Francisco and Honolulu. This was, you know, just nobody could believe this. Everybody's suitably impressed. We have the reports that Sarnoff and Wiegand submitted up through Marconi. It's really interesting reading. We had them on a poster at one point. I think we still do. But anyhow, Sarnoff says this is probably the best radio system anybody's ever seen. So they also did a demonstrations for AT&T. We'll talk about that shortly, and other people. But like I say, again, the fact that Armstrong was at Columbia, and he went to work there after he graduated. I think he taught a Navy radio class, as a matter of fact. But because he's operating in this environment, he does things like he draws a grid plate curve for the tube, just like you'd see nowadays. And I don't know if you can see this over here, but they did oscillograms, you know, with moving mirrors and photographic film, so they could see what the waveforms actually looked like. So he pretty thoroughly nailed down how this thing worked and what was going on. He published that at the end of 1914, and it ends up in the IEEE thing in 1915. Let's talk about these circuits a little bit. And the original Armstrong circuit, you have, this is a transformer out here coming down from the antenna, and he adds a tune circuit out here, which was just a variable inductor in the case of the first radio, and gets it going. Now, by the time this was one of the drawings from his patent, and there were 4 or 5 variations on this, but by 1915, he's simplified it to where the feedback is by way of a simple transformer winding back from the plate circuit back over here. And that's what Armstrong was doing. Later on, of course, you all know this circuit, but this is the same thing. Tickler feedback, on-tuned feedback from the plate circuit back into the input circuit. And I like to count this thing as the dawn of the electronic age, because Armstrong shows them how to use the vacuum tube for radio purposes And that just changes everything. Like I say, one of the most important factors is knowing that something is possible. And now they know it's possible. The whole world goes from spark to continuous wave in very short order. One of the first guys, Lee DeForest, like I said, they did a demo for him, I guess in November, December of 2013. He goes home, he realizes that the circuit oscillates, he klutzes around until he invents what he calls the ultra-audion circuit, the tuned circuits between the plate and the grid. I think if you were to fill in the parasitic capacitances there, it would turn into a Colpitts oscillator. We'll talk about that in a second here. But like I said, DeForest had experimented with radio telephony, and so now he had his guys build a bigger audion tube that he called the ultra-audion, and went ahead and built radio telephone transmitter. Meanwhile, AT&T, they took some kind of formal disclosure from Armstrong in early 1914. I'd really like to know what that said and what it looked like. But they kind of go quiet on him, radio silent on him after that. And guys with names like Colpitts, Hartley, and Heising go ahead and invent real radio as we know it today, very quickly. Talk about those oscillator circuits a little bit. Here's the tickler feedback circuit, which was always just called the tickler feedback circuit because of all the nonsense that was going on in court over who owned the patent. However, when I was at signal school, the Army always did call this the Armstrong oscillator. But the ones that got used, heavily were, here's the Colpitts oscillator. You have a 180-degree phase shift between the input and the output. You also have a 180-degree phase shift between the top and the bottom of the tuned circuit. So you just bring the signal around and you have a split capacitor here that comes into the ground. And so that's your Colpitts oscillator. And Hartley does a similar thing, except instead of tapping the capacitor, he taps the coil. So they're the big time oscillator circuits. AT&T. Now, AT&T was already working on vacuum tubes because they were looking for improved audio amplifiers for long distance telephone. And of course, they have unlimited money, and they're one of the greatest research organizations in the world at this time. So they get going on this with the work of Colpitts and these other guys. By the end of 1915, they've put a AM transmitter in the Navy radio station in Arlington, down south of Washington, D.C., that can be heard in Paris and Honolulu. It was a monstrosity. They built these 50-watt tubes, and they had like 200 of them in parallel in the amplifier of this thing. But there's no time at all. And meanwhile, the Navy was one of the big deals in radio. This was that Arlington station. This is a 2 or 3 story building down here, so you can see the magnitude of this. This was, in the days of those megawatt pulse and arcs and whatnot. And the Navy, starting in 1912, had built what they called the high power chain to stay in contact with the fleet all the way across the Pacific using big 3-tower arrays and the pulse and arcs. And in fact, by 1915, they eliminated 2 of the stations in the chain because now they were using regenerative receivers, and the whole thing worked better. Here's some Navy equipment. The Cohen receiver here is a crystal set, but then there's an outboard Audion regen detector that DeForest sold them and some other stuff like that. So, and in fact, there's similar equipment over in the museum in the Navy history book. There's a picture of radio equipment at Belmar in 1918. And a few years ago, Hugo Piccioni donated a bunch of stuff to it. And sure enough, there was a receiver and an Audion control box and stuff just like in the picture. So that's over in the museum. We're really glad to have that. Now, a spy story. I really like this. There's this French guy named Paul Pichon. Didn't have a picture of him, so I settled for Mata Hari. I figured that was better to look at. But this guy, and this story comes from the saga of the vacuum tube, the Gerald Tyne book. He walks away from the French army in about 1900, and he goes to Germany, where he starts out teaching French to rich people's kids, but he ends up associated with the people running Telefunken and gets involved in radio. In fact, he shows up in the Institute of Radio Engineering yearbook in 1914 as being an engineer, and I found a German crystal detector patent with his name on it. But anyhow, 1914, they send him to the United States to visit to visit the phone company who's working on vacuum tubes for their purposes. General Electric was also working on vacuum tubes because they were looking for ways to modulate the Alexanderson alternators. So Paul comes over, he visits these guys, he gets paperwork from them, he gets samples and all this stuff. He heads back to Germany by way of England. And he gets there on 3 August 1914. I don't know if you know that date, but that's when World War I breaks out. So here he is in England, trying to get back to Germany. And, but he was supposed to, the way back to Germany was through Calais in France. No good. So doesn't quite know what to do, but he went and talked to people he knew at Marconi. He decides he's a Frenchman after all. He gets on the boat, he goes to Calais. They look at his German passport, arrest him. He says to them, call Colonel Ferrier. Now, Ferrier was the head of the French Signal Corps. Ferrier says, yeah, I know the guy's name. Send him and his baggage to me. The Signal Corps is Telegraphie Militaire, and this is 1914. By 1915, they have developed the world's first mass-produced vacuum tube, the so-called TM valve. We have one of these in the cabinet up in the front of the museum. Thanks to Richard, forever grateful for that. High vacuum triode, high vacuum, you know, that was what DeForest was not doing, and the phone company figured out was pretty important. Bright emitter, that means it was just straight tungsten filament. Total production was more than 100,000 units during World War I, and the Brits built a bunch more of them that they called their R valve. Now, remember, this is gets going in 1915, and Armstrong revealing his circuits to people the end of 1913, early 1914. So he's had a real effect on all of this. The French build a whole bunch of military electronics using these tubes. One of them was, this is an amplifier for long wave, so you could hook that to a loop antenna and do good direction finding. That's similar to what H.J. Round at Marconi did. That there's a whole story there about he caused the Battle of Jutland because he saw that the Germans were starting to move out of the port because of his direction finding equipment using R valves. Anyway, they built things like that. My favorite is this guy, E10BIS. There's 6 of those tubes. 3 of them are wired in parallel as a 1-tube transmitter. And then 1 other tube is an Armstrong regenerative detector followed by 2 audio stages. This is a field transportable continuous wave radio, really pretty effective. In fact, late in World War I, it wasn't really in time for the war, but AT&T built a more rugged copy of this for the Signal Corps. Now, speaking of the Signal Corps, the Allied Expeditionary Force, you know, we get involved in the war in 1917. Let me call your attention to this guy, J.J. Carty. Now, he was the chief engineer at AT&T, and in fact, he was the guy, he was the leader of the group that heard the original Armstrong demonstration of the regen. But as the war clouds were gathering, the phone company was going to be heavily involved in telephones and radio and whatnot with the Expeditionary Force. Carty puts on a uniform. I think at one point he becomes the chief signal officer, and he recruits 4,000 people out of industry into the Signal Corps to take care of this. And one of the people he knew and recruited was our friend Edwin Howard Armstrong. He, of course, volunteered for this, but there's letters that exist. And 10 September, he gets a letter, says, effective immediately, you're captain in the Signal Corps. Week later, he gets another letter that says, go down to Hoboken and get on the boat, you're going to France. Now, I think a lot of us knew that Armstrong invented the super heterodyne receiver while he was in the Signal Corps in France. And I had always said, well, what, he had a box of tools and parts under his bunk and he did this in his spare time or whatever. I had some tools and parts under my bunk when I was in Vietnam, it's okay, but no. He was working in an RCA laboratory, not RCA, I'm sorry, AT&T laboratory in France. This was called the Division of Research and Inspection. They rented this mansion in Paris, which had some extra space behind it, and it was a full-scale laboratory. They were analyzing enemy equipment, they were developing new stuff, and they were also inspecting equipment that they were buying, that they were procuring in Europe. So here's Howard as captain, that's his Army mugshot. And so he was assigned to the aircraft radio division. He did a number of things there. But there was concern about shortwave signals. As I pointed out before, you know, everything beyond 1500 kilohertz was, you know, considered useless because the crystal sets and even the simple tube regens wouldn't work real well at those frequencies. And they had a couple of concerns. One was they thought maybe the Germans had some high frequency shortwave capability and they wanted to listen for it. And they also speculated that if they had a high frequency direction finder, they could detect approaching aircraft by tuning into their ignition noise. So he needs a 3 megahertz receiver, and nothing would really work. So he leverages his knowledge of heterodyne detection. That's what the regenerative receiver, when it's oscillating, is a frequency changer. It makes the RF you can't hear into AF you can hear. But the difference here is out here you've got a mixer tube and a mixer tube connected to a loop antenna and an oscillator. But instead of developing a heterodyne that you can't hear, you develop an ultrasonic heterodyne. In these days, they use the word supersonic. For instance, at 100 kilohertz. You take 3 megahertz, you make it into 100 kilohertz, then you run it into that nasty French amplifier, and now you've got all the gain in the world and easily tunable with 2 controls out here in the front end. This is equipment that used to be in the Signal Corps Museum up at Fort Monmouth. Sadly, I'm afraid it's in that warehouse right next to the Ark of the Covenant. I would really love to have this stuff sitting in our museum, but anyway, this was the Armstrong stuff that had been in the museum, and that's the original super heterodyne receiver. And of course, this concept of converting the frequency down to some lower frequency where you can easily deal with it, we're still doing that even in cell phones and whatnot today. So really important development. He gets promoted to major on his way out. I think that this is the famous Major Armstrong photo. I think, again, Bradley Manning, his brother-in-law, took that picture better than the Army mugshot. So anyway, he comes back. He sells various patents in various directions here. He works at Columbia for $1 a year or something like that. And he sells the superhet patent to RCA. Now, by this point, David Sarnoff, who we met down here in 1914, organization climber, is now general manager of newly formed, RCA was formed in 1919. So Armstrong and Sarnoff are good friends. And while he's doing the work at Columbia, he invents the super regenerative circuit. I'm not going to go into exactly what that is, but it's a circuit that kind of opened the way in VHF radio, because you could build a very simple one-tube radio that would operate at high frequencies. But that's the patent that made Armstrong rich. He patents the thing. Sarnoff thinks, well, this is a new Armstrong patent, it's got to be worth a lot of money, which he pays him a whole pile of money and 60,000 shares of RCA stock. My understanding is the stock split 5 times and Armstrong sold out before the crash. Okay, so he's in pretty good shape. And so he works with RCA to develop their consumer super heterodyne. Here he is with one of those radios. He marries Sarnoff's secretary. He also buys a really nice car, Hispano Suiza. When he was courting Marion McGinnis, RCA was moving their WJZ AM transmitter into New York City on top of a building called Aeolian Hall. They had 2 of these towers with a T antenna between them. Armstrong brings one of his buddies who was a photographer and climbs the tower and clowns around up there, and then sends the pictures to Sarnoff's office. Sarnoff was not amused and forbid him to do that anymore, but he marries Marion, and that was, the Armstrong in the Roaring 20s. And of course, the superhet becomes a success for RCA. Now, the nagging problem, this is a quote from Armstrong that I'd never seen. He says, the elimination of static is and Sarnoff had bothered him all along. Hey, can you do something about the static on AM radio? And static was much worse in those days because all the motors and things, nowadays there's a capacitor across them to get rid of the noise from the spark, let alone automotive ignition. Do any of you remember cars that didn't have a suppressed ignition on them? Yeah, real bad news. It's the only one I've ever encountered that approached from any direction always seems to be a stone wall. This is 1922. So he thinks about this for a long time and decides that maybe frequency modulation is the way to do it, and wideband frequency modulation and up into the VHF range. And so he does some early experiments, then he installs a transmitter in the Empire State Building, where RCA had some space up in the top of the thing. This thing is really big because the way you did FM, the way Armstrong did FM, he took a signal down around 500 kilohertz and ran it past a plate circuit of a tube. The plate capacitance would change with the audio voltage coming into it, and so it was in a phase shift circuit. So you phase shift the signal just a little bit, but then you multiply it all the way out to 42 megahertz, and the phase shift becomes a notable frequency shift, like maybe a bandwidth of 200 kilohertz or something like that. So it's wideband FM, and he's got this stuff going on in the Empire State Building, but the relationship with Sarnoff turns ugly, and this is about 1934. Now, all this time, Armstrong's been in one court case after another with DeForest trying to get possession of the regenerative patent. And Armstrong has won all these cases until 1934. But it makes its way to the Supreme Court. And by this point, of course, the patent's been sold off. It isn't, Armstrong should have just relaxed and not worried about this stuff. But it turns out that the final case is RCA, who is one side of the thing, against Radio Electronic Laboratories, which was a company that was building FM stuff for Armstrong. And one of the big guys at REL was Randy Runyon, who was one of Armstrong's childhood friends who had come all the way along. So when they lost that case, it really hit Armstrong hard, and Sarnoff didn't have a very good attitude either. So he throws him out of the Empire State Building. So what to do? Well, but he's got a pile of money. Well, I'm not going to talk too much about how FM works. It's just, AM, you've got noise riding on top of the signal. FM, you got noise riding on top of the signal, but you're not worried about the top of the signal. You limit it, and you're really just looking at the zero crossings in here, and it works like a champ. Anyway, Howard's got a bunch of money. So he builds his own laboratory and his own transmitting station up in Alpine, New Jersey. Now, maybe some of you have been up there in the old days. Yonkers is over here on the other side of the Hudson. This is about 500 feet up above the level of the river, and the tower is something like 450 foot tall. So this puts a monster signal down into New York City. In fact, after 9/11, this tower still exists. 2 or 3 of the New York television stations put transmitters in trailers and brought them up here and put their antennas on the Armstrong Tower to get back on the air. Anyway, so you had the lab building and the tower, and so a lot of the early work was done from there. Here's a picture of Armstrong in his office at Alpine. Here's the original commercial FM receiver that was built by Radio Electronic Laboratories about 1938 or so. But by 1941, you could buy a tuner like this from General Electric and hook it to your own radio and have noticeable FM. Here's another picture of Alpine Tower, but the reason I threw this in, here's the plaque up in Yonkers, And from the plaque site, you can see Alpine Tower. This is Steve Close. Was the brains behind the plaque project. Anyway, by 1941, Armstrong has licensed a whole bunch of people on FM, broadcast receiver manufacturers, transmitter manufacturers. It even becomes apparent that FM on VHF is a good deal for mobile radio, and you've got people like Link, who developed FM police car radios about 1940 for the state of Connecticut. One of the interesting things there is REL actually deployed FM police car radios to the Bayonne, New Jersey police about 1934. There's an interesting picture of some of their cars sitting outside the police station with antennas on them. But so, I mean, there's all this stuff going on, bright future, and Armstrong's right in the middle of it, and then that happens. So all the manufacturing gets turned to war things, and the whole thing comes undone. But Armstrong pushes forward, and we'll talk a little bit about what he did during World War II, which is he had a scheme to use FM for radar. And I won't go into the real details of that, but what it involved, this tower and antenna are from the Army SCR-271 radar. Now, the SCR-270 was the radar that was in Hawaii when the Japanese attacked, and this was the bigger version of the same thing. And so Armstrong used that tower and the antenna and the rotating mechanism, but then he built his own electronics to send out FM signals. And this involved a 3 kilowatt transmitter that was crystal controlled and I think it was quadruple conversion receiver that was frequency locked to the transmitter. I didn't really want to take the time to explain that, but what he was doing was he's modulating his transmitter with an audio frequency, and the receiver's tracking it, but when it bounces back from an airplane, the receiver's only going to hear it when the audio frequency is exactly so that one cycle is the distance out and back. Now, that kind of worked, but I don't think it was really effective, and that isn't how we do radar now. But he built this stuff, and a duplicate set of this stuff came right down here to Camp Evans. And after the war, you've all heard about Project Diana, the single core moon bounce experiments. And everybody says SCR-271. Well, yeah, it was an SCR-271 antenna. This was the building down here at the so-called Diana site. The original SCR-271 antenna is like so. For the moon bounce, they hung a second one under it. And somebody took this wonderful picture with the moon. But the background story on this is there was this guy named Jack DeWitt who was commanding officer of Camp Evans, which was the Army Radar Laboratory. DeWitt before the war, had been an engineer at WSM in Nashville. He was also a radio amateur, and back in the pre-war years, he had speculated about bouncing radio signals off the moon. Well, now it's 1946, the war's over. He's got all this radar stuff and guys and high-powered mathematicians and stuff sitting around. Well, what do we do now? Well, okay, let's bounce radar signals off the moon. Well, in order to do that, they figured it out. In order to be able to detect the signal, you were going to have to use a really narrow receiver bandwidth. And of course, that means you have to have a carefully controlled transmitter frequency so you know where it is. And the Army radar was just a power oscillator that operated at 111 megahertz, and that wasn't stable at all, let alone the receiver. But they looked around, they said, oh, well, we got this Armstrong stuff here. And I think Armstrong probably got involved in helping them modify it, but that isn't really established. I suspect he came down here to help them with it. But anyhow, so they had this transmitter, carefully controlled frequency. The receiver would track it and had a bandwidth of 80 hertz, really narrow. There was one problem. They calculated that there would be a Doppler shift coming back from the moon, maybe as much as 300 hertz. So they took the final conversion oscillator in that quadruple superheterodyne and made it manually tunable so they could account for the predicted Doppler shift. And that's how they pulled off the moon bounce. Here's Jack DeWitt tuning up the transmitter. And they did this for a number of years. I think they increased the transmitter power, and it got to the point where they were even issuing QSL cards where people reported hearing the Diana signals. So, you know, Armstrong stuff right here. The whole thing has a sad ending. It was bad enough that the war messed up all the FM efforts, but in the FCC, probably egged on by RCA, who was working on television, changed Armstrong's frequency allocations from 42 to 50 up to where it is now. So this meant that all the stuff that was out there, all the receivers that people had bought, were going to go obsolete. And so all those people who were supposed to be paying Armstrong patent money stopped doing it. He's got a lot, he's spending a lot of money on lawyers and whatnot. He having trouble paying the people that work for him. He has a fight with Marion. He hits her with a fireplace poker, and she leaves him. And so 1st February 1954, this is 40 years from meeting Sarnoff down here to the day. He takes the air conditioner out of his 13th floor window, puts on his hat and coat, and steps out. End of story. Somebody was asking me about this today. The rest of the story is that in the subsequent 5 or 6 years, Marion Armstrong rounds up the lawyers, and they went and beat the snot out of 5 or 6 big companies that owed them money. And so there was a happy ending, at least for her. A good read is Empire of the Air. Maybe some of you have read this. There's also a Ken Burns PBS video. You can watch that on Prime for $1.98. And the one I really like is Dave Osmond of Firesign Theater did a radio drama version of Empire of the Air. Do you know about Firesign Theater? Well, in his version of the Armstrong demonstration down here, Howard is heard to say, "Hand me the pliers, Dave." So it's enjoyable. I don't know how positively accurate it is, but it's a lot of fun. And that got back in 2005. There was a commemorative broadcast done on 42.8 from the Alpine Tower. It was also broadcast on Fairleigh Dickinson's FM station, which shares the tower for its antenna. And the recording of that ended up on archive.org. So we've got a link. You can go listen to the Dave Osmond thing on the web. So that's pretty much the story here. There's one more thing. And why do we do this? Because coming soon, across the street in the H building, is the newly done Institute of Electronic Engineers Traveling Armstrong display called On Scene Signals. It's a really nice display. They had it set up at the Industrial Museum in Bethlehem for about 6 months, and now it's here, and it'll be here for about 6 months, starting the end of May. So don't miss it, but the catch is we're gonna have to provide some extra docents to man this thing. So please volunteer. We'll need at least one per museum day. And, but it's a really nice setup, really nice display, professionally done. There was actually money involved in this, and they hired this guy named Daniel Mitchell, a Brit, doctorate, whatever, and he just worked on this really amazingly well, and I think you'll get to meet Daniel one of these days. But that's, like I say, coming soon. So anyway, questions, comments about Armstrong? Yes?
I was just curious if they ever used Alpine while Armstrong was alive for commercial use. Did he just build a tower for experimenting, or was there?
They broadcast. I think it was starting in 1937 or so, and they were simulcasting WQXR's classical music some of the time, and there were also 2 or 3 additional FM stations built up into New England, the so-called Yankee Network. The Yankee Network was an AM thing, but there were 3 stations up, one of them on Mount Washington, and they relayed signals between these things as a network. And so, yeah, there was actually broadcasting from Alpine. Yes, Bill?
The change of frequencies to the upper band, was that pretty much egged on by Sarnoff?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, because they wanted they wanted space for television, and that was part of the problem back in the 30s when they came to no good. I mean, Sarnoff is running the world's largest AM radio network. He doesn't need competition from FM, and he is trying to start up electronic television.
Right, and that frequency band would have been channel 1, which never came to fruition.
Yeah. Is that where channel 1 was?
Yeah.
Below 50 megahertz? Okay.
Channel 2 was 50 to 54 about, yeah. So
Yeah.
the channel 1 would have been right in the middle of the Armstrong band.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, if you had that frequency, your FM car antenna would have been like,
Well, yeah. The change was probably better for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Another problem is down in the low VHF, skip can come in and cause you trouble.
Now, Armstrong's picked that frequency band. Was it arbitrary, was it because of limitations in construction?
I think it was. I think it was just in concert with the FCC and where are you going to let me do.
The original frequencies he used. Why did he pick the 40 to 50?
I think that's because what he could get.
Okay.
You know, and he says.
Because back in those days too, designing and implementing high frequency circuits was difficult.
Right. Yeah.
And now it's considered VHF.
Yeah. It was.
VHF, actually.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It was. You know, it's VHF now, but you know, you didn't have the television tubes developed yet to really do that job. Sir.
When or how was the time frame between Spark leaving, CW starting, and where Spark is banned, so to speak?
I'm trying to remember.
1997, they banned Spark. And 1921 or so is when the vacuum tube really came into
Yes.
So as far as FM, I mean, we went through the 50s, 60s before, for general public, FM radio was it technical reasons or business reasons? Why?
Well, it took a while to get spun up. First of all, they had to recover from that frequency change thing. And I think one of the things that helped FM develop was the hi-fi craze. And I hadn't mentioned it, but Armstrong was early on involved in multiplex signals on FM. So ultimately, after his death, 1961, I think they introduced FM stereo. So, and also FM receivers were pretty expensive in the beginning too. It was kind of a big deal to, when did you have your first FM radio? You know, so it took a while to get going. Yes?
There was about a 3.5-year difference when the Armstrong band came out versus the changed FM.
Yeah.
From June 1945 until January 49. Is that why there were some radios?
Yeah, there were some radios that yeah, there were some radios that tuned both bands because there was an overlap because they grandfathered the old band in until 1949.
Were some radio stations broadcasting the same on the old and new band?
I really don't know. I really don't know.
But that's the reason why some manufacturers like Zenith had two bands on it, just
Right.
so they could fill the
Yeah, so they could cover everything. Yes.
Was there any difference in the quality between the original FM and change to? Higher?
I don't think really, you know, the modulation scheme is the same. The one thing like I said, the one thing I do know is that the lower frequencies are more prone to interference when you have high sunspot levels and you start, you know, a signal bounces in from Chicago and on the same frequency. Yes?
So, just a question I've always wondered. So, Armstrong's famous tower is the one that's in Alpine, right?
Yeah.
But my understanding is he had multiple towers before that one. And one of those towers wound up, was moved in later years to Staten Island. It still stands there. Last I knew, it belonged to a company called High Point. It's at the top of High Point Road. And it, until he died, was owned by Frank Gunther, who was the chief engineer around and all that.
Yeah, REL, yeah.
Armstrong. Now, what I've always wondered, and I've never been able to find out, is where did this tower originate?
I don't know the details of it, but there were experiments done before Alpine that involved a transmitter up here somewhere and a receiver in South Jersey and things like that.
Because I know that tower didn't originate there. I know Gunther moved it there. And I know it was already, Gunther always said it was Armstrong's tower.
Yeah, there's details of this around. We could figure that out, but I don't know the answer. Yes?
Quick question. The band, what bandwidth, whatever. Roughly 20 megahertz, you know, for the new FM band, and less than 10.
Yeah, he got more channels out of it.
Deviation the same?
No, deviation was the same. I think it's, Tremor, you know, the bandwidth for the channel is 200 kilohertz. I don't remember if the deviation is 50 or 75 kilohertz, but because you get sidebands and stuff.
So the original Armstrong band couldn't handle the same number of stations.
Yeah, couldn't handle the same number of stations. So it was an improvement in that sense.
Certain FM radios have FM channels versus frequencies. Was that the old FM or new FM?
I think in both cases there were channel numbers assigned. In fact, I think if you dig into the FCC websites, I think you're going to find there's still channel numbers. They're just not used.
Is there anything on the original FM band?
Well, that became so-called low VHF. Used to be a lot of police cars and fire stations and things like that. Back in the day. Now the fact of the matter is, and there's a whole drama here. Fact of the matter is, there is a licensed 42.8 transmitter at Alpine. In fact, a friend of mine, he was a kid just out of high school when I worked with him at Gately Electronics in Pennsylvania back in the 70s, and at that point he was a pirate FM broadcaster. And I left Gately and whatever, hadn't heard anything from Steve for years. And leading up to the 2005 thing, somebody says to me, hey, Steve Hemphill is building an old band FM transmitter we're going to put on the air. I get in touch with Steve, and he says, yeah, you want to come up here and the day we do this? I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. In fact, I put a website up for them so we could take reception reports and things like that. But I go up to Alpine, I don't know what to expect. Well, maybe it's going to be 5 guys hanging around a repeater site. I get up there, turn it off 9W into the woods. Here's a tent and a couple of people with clipboards, and they've got my name on it, and they've got a t-shirt for me with the FM logo on it. Go back in, they have a circus tent set up to feed everybody. And they did this broadcast in conjunction with WFDU, and everybody that was up there had a story. There was a guy there named Ren McMahon, who was one of the surviving people who had actually worked for Armstrong on the FM radar thing. So it was an amazing an amazing thing.
Do they ever fire that up anymore?
The whole thing is messed up. Mainly due to the new owners of the site and insurance concerns and all that kind of stuff. And now, a couple of years ago, they decided to renovate the lab building, so they have that all torn apart internally. And it used to be we could get people in there for special occasions. Now, the last thing I heard was the Society of Broadcast Engineers is planning on having some kind of picnic there, I think in June. And in fact, they had asked me if I'd do an Armstrong presentation there, but then it turned out when we couldn't use the inside of the building, there really wasn't any way to do that, so I lost track of it. So hopefully, there's the original owner was a guy named Chuck Sackerman, and he was the guy that bankrolled that 2005 extravaganza. And he was, willing to let people onto the site, because I know I think some of us had been up there at one point. I know there was a time where I had a friend visiting from New England. He says, hey, can you get me into Alpine? And I called the engineer up there, and we went up and saw them, but they've cut that off. And it seems like Steve can't even get in to operate the transmitter. So it's sad, but I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe nothing. The site is a repeater site. There's antennas all over that tower for the police and the FBI and all kinds of stuff like that. But
we had gotten there, I think twice. We were on invitation with the Sacking folks and Chuck, and also Dave Abramson, the chief engineer.
yeah, Dave Abramson's the
and then also Harps Club before that, thanks to.
yeah, but those opportunities have been cut off, unfortunately.
Well, as per Dave Abramson, the insurances were required now, as all insurances get crazy. I wanted club, we had to acquire workman's compensation as if we were a vendor there or something to do with the existing tower and antennas. And we looked into it, and it just was impossibly expensive for us as a club to buy that type of insurance. So consequently, again, we were not allowed to come up there, which is a shame. I've been up there privately a couple of times for other reasons. I'm fortunate enough, I live 6 miles from there.
Yeah.
Maybe someday, maybe not. We don't know.
Yes, Matt?
I meant to ask her earlier, this going back to the beginning of the presentation with the Shark River test with the receiver and the building. What was the antenna? Were they using the one that
The mile long, they had the mile long antenna.
Okay.
That was why they were successful.
I imagine that helped quite a bit.
Yeah, that helped a lot, because they could hear better from here than they could from up at Columbia.
Apparently, if you have an Armstrong band FM receiver, you can occasionally hear some strange things from people who forget to turn off their baby monitors.
Aha, yeah, 49 megahertz would be in there. Yes.
Yeah, I have a 46 Bob Carson with the old FM band, and I've never been able to receive anything except once in a while. It must be off of like one of the harmonics of the local oscillator. I'll occasionally get a specific FM station on the new band. It's like a 101.5, 101.7, something like that.
Yeah, you probably,
And then the local oscillator drifts, it fades out.
right, or you know, off a harmonica, local oscillator or something.
I don't know if there's any way, if anyone's ever heard of any way of converting it from the old to the new band, or even
I had contemplated making a converter that would take a chunk of the new band and move it down to the old band. I'm not sure if there's any good reason to do that. I've actually got some parts, but I never got around to doing it. Anything else? Yeah.
Can I tell a bit of a personal story?
Sure, sure.
I spent my career as an electrical engineer with the Plasma Physics Laboratory, and in that capacity, high-powered radio frequency transmitters. And my grandfather was an RCA electrical engineer in the 1920s, and he passed away in 1937, so I did not get to meet him, but he eventually worked his way up to be a vice president in charge of the receiver division in Camden, which is quite something. But for around 1921, Professor Moorcroft, that Al mentioned, wrote a book all about the state of RF and all the nifty things they knew at that time, including those oscillograms, those loads of pictures. Yes. I actually have a PDF to copy of that book. If anybody wants it, we'll do it on the website or something. I'm sure it's out of copyright by now. Anyway, as part of my career in electrical engineering there at the Plasma Physics Lab, Columbia University also has a bit of a fusion energy experiment, much like the one at the Plasma Physics Laboratory, except quite a bit smaller. And it has an RF heater on it, which was a vacuum tube affair, and they were having some trouble with it. So the physicist whom I worked with actually graduated from Columbia University, so he went up there, he drugged me up and one or two other electrical folks, and we were poring over this circuit, and it's a couple of vacuum tubes and some coils wrapped around this toroidal vacuum vessel, which was their experiment. And the circuit looked a little familiar. And so when I got home, I looked at my 1921 book by Dr. Moorcroft, and there was the circuit of a push-pull RF transmitter with coils with a tuned circuit, cross-couple the grids to the plates, and it takes off and runs as an oscillator just fine. So all this stuff even comes down to the modern age.
Yeah, thanks, Nev.
Is plasma physics still active, or?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, but fusion power is still 50 years away.
Right.
Because I remember you could get tours until they started.
Go back to the future.
Opening it with like tritium or something, then they wouldn't allow anybody in there.
Yeah.
Because they weren't getting any energy, just using.
Only we got 10.5
Okay, well, thank you for your attention. A couple of things. If you've never done it, when you have a chance, play with the Armstrong demo over in the museum, because a lot of us played with regenerative receivers, but we always heard the big whoop from the carrier on the AM stations. Spark station doesn't have a carrier, so you get that noise that Armstrong couldn't figure out at the beginning. And also consider volunteering some time to be a docent, or maybe even help develop some exhibits and things for the museum. We can use help. If you can give us a day a month, you know, that helps, you know, and you don't need to know a lot. I mean, you guys know a lot anyway, you know. If you're gonna be a docent, you can just talk about the things you know about and people will appreciate it. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Al. Have another round of applause for Al. Okay, we have a donation that Joe brought in for us. And where did it come from, Joe?
It came from a retired gentleman in Springfield, Pennsylvania.
In Springfield. And Joe was very kind to come and pick it up and bring it in. So we have the D of JD Auction Services with us this evening, and it would be very nice to have him as the auctioneer. So I know he will be happy to do that. All right, there's a lot of tubes, guys. There's some interesting tubes, and there's also an oscilloscope. So please pay attention and go home with boxes of tubes, okay? We will be in Princeton. We are going to start it'll be our summer hours. So next month, Princeton. Thanks for coming.